Desperately Using Susan is the 13th and final episode of the second season of Good Advice. This is the final episode of the series, which is devastating. And as I mentioned in the last two discussions, this is one of 3 unaired episodes. So technically it's the last. I don't know if it's the last chronologically, but either way, it's the last one that I had to watch. And it's a really good episode, and I'm rather emotional that it's over, and I'll try not to get too upset. I still have a few teeny tiny Shelley Long things to watch, but mostly just cameo appearances in random episodes of random TV shows. Slightly heartbroken. So this one starts off with Susan with a session with a client whose wife keeps failing to remember their sessions, and he feels obviously very worthless and like he's not important and like nobody remembers him. And this character comes up a few times, which I quite liked. Susan is actually waiting for Dr. Moorhead, and he is, for her, one of her heroes. He is a psychologist. He is a legend. He arrives, he's played by David Groh, and he has a bloody nose. Apparently he got into a mild altercation. Nobody was really hurt, and that seems insignificant, but I will come back to that in a little bit, and I'm kind of not sure what they were doing with this, and I might be missing something. So if anybody has any thoughts, please feel free to share, but I'll get in with that in a little bit. It turns out that Dr. Moorhead is a guest at a banquet, and he actually likes Susan's book, and he asks her to introduce him at the banquet, and of course she's absolutely delighted by this. So she's working on her speech, and Paige said something interesting. She said that actually maybe Dr. Moorhead is using Susan for attention, because she's the one who now has a book on the bestsellers list. I guess the idea there is that Dr. Moorhead was once upon a time a leader in his field, but now Susan, other psychologists, are writing the bestsellers. His work is maybe being pushed aside a little bit, and by having her introduce him, it puts more attention on him, which is an interesting thought. And this is further cemented when Dr. Moorhead comes back in, and he's actually brought the rough draft of his new book for Susan to read. And as soon as he did that, my immediate thought was, he's going to ask her to write the foreword, because having a notable name writing the foreword of a book is a really good way to get eyes on that book. And a little while later, that is actually confirmed. So Paige was right. And Dr. Moorhead his behaviour was a little bit peculiar. He basically told Artie that Artie was going to have to buy plates at this banquet, and it's a charity banquet obviously, so the plates aren't free. It's quite expensive, several $1,000s for this table. Dr. Moorhead's behaviour felt a little peculiar there, and I don't know if the purpose of that was to just make us dislike him a bit more, because he was not really considerate of Artie's feelings, but it was also a good way to bring Artie and the other characters to the banquet later on in the episode. Susan then comes in a while later, late for her appointment because she was up all night working on the speech. Dr. Moorhead comes in with a neck brace. He got into another injury, another accident, and they didn't really do anything with that. I don't really know what the point of that was. I don't know if I'm missing something, if I overlooked something really obvious, but it just felt a bit peculiar why he kept getting injured. And this is the point when he asks Susan to write the foreword for his book, as I expected he would, and it has to be done by tomorrow. Very disrespectful of her time as well. So he's not a very nice person, and they say never meet your heroes. Well, in Susan's case, it seems like it would have been better if she hadn't. And then the rest of the episode, we play this out at the banquet, and Dr. Moorhead is actually giving this little talk to this crowd of people, and he's actually saying some of Susan's work. He's talking about things that Susan had concluded, research that she'd done, and to passing it off as his own. And Paige obviously tells Susan, you need to tell people, when you introduce him, you should take this opportunity to make people aware of what he's really like. Susan's not going to do this because she's a good person. She's going to take the high road. She knows that it's not the time or the place. But when she introduces him, also Shelley's outfit in this scene is, well, her outfits are always gorgeous, but this one in particular was absolutely stunning. And Susan stands up to give this introduction for Dr. Moorhead, and her subconscious threw coffee on him, on his legs, on his crotch, and needless to say, it was a pretty comical moment, and it was a nice way to kind of get her own back without affecting other people, because one of the points she made is that people in this room look up to him. And for her to stand there and say, well, he's just a thief, he steals other people's ideas, that's going to hurt a lot of people. That's not to say they don't have a right to know that, but again, time and place, I don't think this was the right occasion. So Susan did the right thing, but thanks to her subconscious, was still able to get a bit of revenge. And it was quite nice. It was a really nice part of the episode. So really enjoyed it. Definitely a solid episode. Susan was an absolute delight, and honestly, I'm absolutely devastated. I've been watching Good Advice for how many weeks? We have 13 episodes in season 2 and 6 in season 1. So at least 19, plus I was watching it alternating between this and Kelly. So probably about half a year I've spent watching Good Advice, and I loved it. I really, really wish there were more episodes, and I didn't feel that way with Kelly. I enjoyed watching Shelley Long and Kelly, but I didn't really find the show to be that amazing. But Good Advice, I have really thoroughly enjoyed. Very funny, great narratives, great characters. I think bringing in Teri Garr was a really good decision as well. Paige brought something really great to this. Treat Williams is great. Everybody's really brilliant. Susan DeRuzza is just fabulous. I'm not committing this to stone, but I think she might be my second favourite Shelley Long character. Obviously, Diane Chambers is number 1. So, on the one hand, heartbreaking that it's over, but at the same time, I can watch it again. And I probably will watch it again at some point, and I'm sure I'll really thoroughly enjoy it. I wish it had gone for a 3rd season, but what we get is still pretty great. Really loved Good Advice. A really solid potential end to the 2nd season. As I said, it was unaired, so the actual final episode was A Chance of Showers, but nevertheless, Desperately Using Susan is really great. Good Advice is absolutely fantastic. Shelley Long is perfect, and I have loved every second of this experience.